The USS Gerald R. Ford, the $13 billion nuclear-powered supercarrier, was removed from active service after a serious propulsion failure raised concerns about its ability to survive long deployments at sea. Today, something shocking is happening. The ship is finally returning to the water, but this is not a routine relaunch. It is the reemergence of a 100,000-ton weapons platform whose repairs were never fully explained, and the Navy is not eager to discuss what was really fixed.
The $13 billion floating fortress comes back to life. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not simply a warship returning to service. It is a national asset engineered to dominate the world's oceans for the next 50 years. Stretching more than 1,100 feet from bow to stern and displacing roughly 100,000 tons when fully loaded, the carrier is larger than 3 football fields laid end to end and heavier than most skyscrapers built on land. Every compartment, deck, and system is designed to allow the United States to project air power anywhere on the planet without asking permission, relying on foreign bases, or slowing down for logistics. The $13 billion price tag attached to the Ford makes it the most expensive single weapon system ever constructed. That cost does not reflect luxury or excess, but the reality of building a floating city powered by 2 nuclear reactors capable of sustained operations for decades without refueling. Those reactors do not simply push the ship through the water, they feed an electric architecture that powers sensors, weapons, aircraft launch systems, radar arrays, and internal networks that coordinate thousands of sailors and hundreds of aircraft at once. This ship is a power plant, an airbase, and a command center fused into one hull. What separates the Ford from previous carriers is not just size, but intention. Older Nimitz-class carriers were designed around the technology of their era, then upgraded over time. The Ford was built to accommodate future technology that didn't exist when construction began. It generates roughly 3 times more electrical power than its predecessors, not to solve a current problem, but to avoid future limitations. This excess power allows the ship to integrate systems that did not exist when construction began and to adapt to weapons and sensors still under development. In naval terms, this is not just modernization, but strategic patience built into steel and wiring. One of the most visible examples of this shift is the replacement of steam catapults with the electromagnetic aircraft launch system known as EMALS. Steam systems had served the Navy for decades, but they were mechanically complex, maintenance-heavy, and rough on aircraft frames. EMALS uses controlled electromagnetic force to launch aircraft with precise, adjustable power. This allows lighter drones, heavily loaded strike fighters, and future aircraft designs to launch safely from the same deck. It also reduces stress on aircraft, increasing their lifespan and reducing maintenance downtime. In combat operations, fewer human bottlenecks can mean the difference between launching aircraft on schedule or losing critical minutes. All of this feeds into the ship's primary mission: sustained air dominance. The Ford is designed to generate up to 270 sorties per day, a significant increase over earlier carriers. This is not about one dramatic strike, but about relentless pressure through day after day, hour after hour of aircraft launching, recovering, rearming, and launching again. It is the ability to overwhelm adversaries through endurance, not spectacle. The Ford's return matters because it is not just a ship leaving dry dock, it is the return of a working aircraft carrier that the Navy depends on to control large areas of the ocean. This ship was built to launch air power, defend fleets, and support U.S. forces worldwide. But even the most advanced warship ever built can be crippled by a single failure, and for the Gerald R. Ford, that failure happened far sooner than planned.
What went wrong? The failure that forced the Navy's hand. The problem revealed itself during sea trials in 2018, not through dramatic alarms or visible damage, but through data that did not look right. Engineers monitoring the USS Gerald R. Ford detected abnormal behavior in one of the ship's main thrust bearings. This component sits at the heart of the carrier's propulsion system, transferring power from the nuclear reactors to the massive propeller shafts that drive the ship through the water.
It is not a pump or a valve that can be swapped out during a port visit. It is a foundational mechanical element buried deep inside the ship, and its failure carries serious consequences. As testing continued, the situation became impossible to downplay. The bearing showed signs of stress and degradation that exceeded acceptable limits. At low speeds, the system could still function, but at higher power levels, where a carrier must be able to sprint, maneuver, and respond to threats, the risk escalated sharply. Engineers understood what this meant. If that bearing failed completely while the ship was underway, it could damage the propulsion train, block a shaft, or force an emergency shutdown. In the worst case, it could leave a 100-ton carrier unable to move under its own power. That scenario was unacceptable. A carrier that cannot maneuver is not just vulnerable, but becomes a liability to every escort ship assigned to protect it. It limits strike operations, disrupts fleet formations, and invites adversaries to exploit weakness. The Ford was designed to operate at the center of a carrier strike group, not to be towed back to port under escort. The idea of risking a catastrophic failure at sea was never on the table. A full investigation followed, and the findings were blunt. The root cause traced back to machining errors during manufacturing by General Electric. On paper, the thrust bearing met design specifications. Under real-world stress, microscopic imperfections within the metal created weak points. These flaws concentrated stress in ways the component could not tolerate during sustained operations, especially at high speed. This was not a matter of wear and tear. It was a precision failure in a system where precision is non-negotiable. What made the situation more serious was the scale. The thrust bearing is enormous and integrated into the propulsion system in a way that makes its replacement slow, complex, and disruptive. There was no workaround and no software fix. There was also no way to limit operations and hope for the best. The Navy faced a choice between accepting risk or removing the ship from service to correct the problem completely. For a platform meant to represent the highest standard of American naval power, there was only one option. Ordering the Ford into extended dry dock was not taken lightly. This was the lead ship of a new class, the most advanced carrier ever built, and it was being sidelined early in its operational life. On paper, it looked like a setback, but in reality, it was a demonstration of discipline. The Navy understood that a compromised carrier at sea is worse than no carrier at all. Reliability matters more than appearances. The decision meant over 15 months in dry dock, not just to replace a bearing, but to tear into the propulsion system, correct the flaw, and ensure it would never happen again. That timeline reflected the seriousness of the issue and the Navy's refusal to cut corners. The Ford would return to service only when it met the standard it was built to represent. But fixing the problem would require one of the most precise and demanding shipyard operations ever attempted.
Getting the USS Gerald R. Ford into dry dock was not a simple matter of steering it into a space and shutting the gates. It was a meticulous engineering operation where every movement was planned, rehearsed, and monitored in real time. Tugboats surrounded the carrier like precision tools, not brute force pushers with the job of moving an 1,100-foot, 100,000-ton warship into position with tolerances measured in inches. At this scale, even a minor misalignment could translate into structural stress once the ship's full weight came off the water. As the carrier crept into the dock, engineers tracked its position continuously. Laser alignment systems, reference markers, and ballast adjustments worked together to ensure the hull was centered perfectly over the support blocks embedded in the dock floor. These blocks were not generic stands, as they had to be placed in exact locations designed to carry the ship's weight without bending the hull or stressing internal frames. Once the Ford was in position, it was secured and stabilized before the next phase could begin. Nothing moved forward until every check confirmed the ship was exactly where it needed to be. Draining the dock was a slow, deliberate process. Over 100 million gallons of water were removed, not in a rush, but in carefully controlled stages. As the water level dropped, the hull emerged section by section, revealing parts of the ship that would normally never see daylight during its operational life. Propeller shafts longer than a school bus became visible, and massive rudders designed to steer a floating city were exposed. The scale of the ship was impossible to ignore once the ocean was no longer carrying its weight. This was the most critical moment. As the last water drained away, the entire mass of the carrier transferred
transferred onto the support blocks. Any error in alignment at this stage could have twisted the hull, damaged internal systems, or introduced new problems far worse than the original one. So, the engineers had monitored load distribution constantly, checking that weight was settling exactly as planned. The shipyard did not just drain water, but carefully guided the Ford onto solid ground. With the hull fully exposed, technicians could finally access the propulsion system in a way that is normally impossible. The truss bearings sat deep within the ship's structure, surrounded by layers of steel, shafts, and support systems, and reaching them was no easy feat. Seeing them in full context made one thing clear. These components were not designed for quick fixes. They were integrated into the heart of the ship, and replacing them meant disassembling and reassembling systems that had to function flawlessly once back at sea. The repair itself demanded extreme precision. Removing and installing the new bearing assemblies required alignment tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. At this scale, being slightly off was not acceptable and would introduce vibration, wear, and future failure. This was not brute force labor, but precision engineering performed on components weighing tons. As such, it needed specialized tools, custom fixtures, and constant measurement. Every adjustment had to be checked, then checked again. Throughout the process, nothing was left to chance. Every step was documented, inspected, and verified by multiple teams. Engineers knew that once the dock flooded again, there would be no easy access to correct mistakes. So the standard was absolute, to ensure that when the Ford returned to the water, it had to be right the first time. After months of work below the waterline, the next challenge was reversing the process without undoing any of it.